Hello everyone, welcome to Daily Tanya for Kaf Vav Iyar Tafshin Peidal. So, don't worry, I will get a haircut soon. So, let's begin. ונמצא שבין, וההבדל שבין עולמות עליונים ותחתונים הוא מצד המשכת החיות, אשר אינסוף ברוך הוא ממשיך ומאיר בבחינת גילוי מההיעלם. So what does all that mean? So, we've discussed previously, and it's discussed several times in Tanya and in Chassidus in general, how Hashem is present everywhere. What does that mean? That means that the world, in other words, there's this whole theological discussion of whether divinity is transcendent or whether it's immanent, right? You have the sort of Spinoza view of immanence, and you have the sort of classical religious view, or on the extreme end, the sort of Gnostic view of transcendence. So, what are we talking about here? So, Baal Tanya has a unique way of understanding this question. And when he talks about Hashem's transcendence, Hashem's very transcendence is what makes it so his presence is so close. Okay, I'll explain that. In other words, the fact that Hashem is not limited by the world means that the world doesn't take up any of the space where God would be if the world wasn't there. Okay, maybe that's a little bit complicated, but in other words, because God is so far beyond the world, so the world's existence doesn't come in place of God's existence. There are two completely different orders and can therefore coexist. Right? So the fact that the world exists has no effect on God's existence. So God's existence is the same. Okay, so in that sense, the world doesn't take up space where God would be if the world wasn't there, right? Like I said, which you can understand as saying that God completely fills the world because he is transcendent, because he transcends it. It's really brilliant if you think about it. So that's in the matter of Hashem's transcendence. Now we're going to talk about the sort of more immanent approach, and we're going to talk about, so again, this is where the Alter Rebbe kind of flips the whole discussion on its head, right? The more immanentist views usually say that, well, because God is immanent in the world, then everything is a path to God, and therefore all things are equal. The Alter Rebbe kind of flips it and says, no, it's the very transcendence that makes God so accessible. Okay? Whereas he says that it's the immanence, right, which is the way that Hashem sort of structures the world through his will. That's what creates difference in the world. That's what creates hierarchy. Okay, so now we're going to see that inside. So we said, so the difference between the higher and the lower worlds, so what does that mean? So the difference between the higher and the lower worlds is not in Hashem's presence there, because Hashem's presence is completely transcendent and therefore is the same everywhere. But it is different in the sort of different amount of sort of life-giving force, different sort of animating force that he brings into the world that sort of reveals his existence, right? Because Hashem is the ultimate, the life of life, right? And he says in brackets, "Shezeh echad me'atamim," and this is one of the reasons, "She'hashpa'a v'hamshachat hachayut mechuna b'shem ol," right? So he's saying that the granting of the sort of animating spirit that God gives the world is basically a form of divine revelation. Okay? So God's presence within the world is through a hierarchy of revelation. Okay, so God's revelation within the world is hierarchical. His presence is equal, but his revelation is hierarchical, which is brilliant. So this sort of animating force that he gives to all worlds and all creatures. This שבהם שהעולמות העליונים מקבלים בבחינת קצת יותר מהתחתונים. So the higher worlds receive a greater revelation than the lower worlds. וכל הברואים שבהם, and all of the creatures that are within these higher worlds, מקבלים כל אחד כפי כוחו, they each receive according to their ability. ותכונתו, שהיא תכונת ובחינת המשכה פרטית. So according to its own sort of private and unique relationship with Hashem. אשר סוף ברוך הוא ממשיך ומאיר לו. Right, that Hashem, sort of the animating life force that Hashem bestows upon it. והתחתונים and the lower worlds, אפילו הרוחני, even the lower spiritual worlds, אינם מקבלים מבחינת גילוי כל כך. They don't receive that animating, life-giving spirit from Hashem so intensely and so clearly and in such a revealed way. רק בלבושים רבים, but only with many sort of coverings and sort of, we say Hashem works in mysterious ways, right? So it's that aspect of mysteriousness where things aren't exactly so clear. אשר הצוף ברוך הוא מלביש בהם החיות והאור, אשר ממשיך ומאיר להם להחיותם. So that revelation is more hidden, it's more mysterious, and Hashem sort of brings it through in parables and things that are a little bit more difficult to understand. So that's all for today, and then we'll continue tomorrow.